Oh, okay. Well, you're going to get spoiled for this season. I'm sorry, but yeah, we mean like what is going to happen in literal future. Like we don't know what's going to happen, what they're going to bring into the show, but if it's a consensus that we don't want to know what happens to them later on, we can talk around it. So, are you okay with hearing spoilers for the future?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Everybody.
I got a lot. So, Anne Walker's life was very complicated. She had her family die, and then obviously we see that she really struggles with a lot of depression and such around that. And then what they didn't show on the show, she had a suitor who died also recently before, and then she had rape and just all of this stuff, and then she has this money and not really any friends and not really any purpose to life. And I mean, I'm a mom and I stay at home, so like I understand how you can start to spiral when you don't feel like you have purpose.
Do we know how much is in the diaries about her mental health?
Oh yeah, a ton.
Okay.
A ton. A lot. In fact, interesting enough, Anne gets aggravated with it. Gets so aggravated with it that over a 11-month period, like literally 11 months, they break up. Like they completely break up. She goes off to her sister's house, and Anne basically breaks up with her. And you kind of get that in this show, but then she goes to, was it Copenhagen? She goes to Copenhagen and has all of her like stuff happening in Copenhagen, and she does get summoned back by this letter that she received, the letter that she receives from her sister, not from her sister, from the doctor taking care of her aunt, that suggests that she's more sick than she actually is. And she ends up traveling back, and it takes like 15 days to get back to Halifax, thank you. And in this whole process and period, like is a complete mess, and Anne Walker, Miss Walker is what she refers to her as in the diary, but Miss Walker is a complete mess. Like she, there's suggestions that she almost tries to commit suicide at one point because of the breakup. There's that. There's she's put into like a home near her sister for a little bit, and then comes out because she was a lady basically, and they didn't want her to be around everyone else. But she writes it as if she went. They say she went away, so it's not really clear where she went. And Anne is just like she's disgusted with Miss Walker over this 10-month period, and doesn't understand why she hasn't heard from her, and then on top of it, like doesn't really care what happened to her, and is trying to basically lament her own love life during this time period. But they kind of left that up a little bit. Yeah, but it was in there, but
I also kind of got the impression that it wasn't even necessarily she didn't care, she was forcing herself not to care.
Right.
Because she, like her goal, and we see this on the show, is to find someone to spend the rest of her life with, and she's been brokenhearted so many times, and it's so obviously so hard in this time period for her to get what she wants here.
And also somebody rich. I mean, that was the other thing about
Yeah.
it's like she like any other gentleman of the era. She's looking not. She rejected a lover because they didn't have enough money. Sorry, you're cute and all, but so I mean that was part of it as well. And Ann Lister fell into the same trap that everybody else did around Miss Walker, in that she's sensitive, she's melancholic. We must treat broken. We must treat her with kid gloves. Her entire family did that. And can we go into spoiler territory? I mean, after Ann Lister died, Ann Lister's own family treated Miss Walker that way, and she was committed to an asylum.
yeah.
So you have just the treatment of somebody who is probably hugely sheltered, has gone through multiple tragedies in life, no doubt dealing with mental health issues, and everybody around her, including the woman she loves, is basically not having it. It's pretty horrible.
I mean, they're all to some degree using her as well.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, her family and Lister. I mean, it's about the money, and so when you are mentally ill and then you don't have a good support system around you, it just compounds everything. And she just, the social norm of the time was you went away. You bring in addicts or
We don't talk
whatever.
about that person in the attic.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another beautiful performance by Sophie Rundle as Anne Walker. Again, like these two women, besides the insane chemistry that they have together, which I think makes this love story, especially the fast pace that the show is putting you through, I bought it completely. And I love that this idea that Anne has always been sort of fascinated by Anne Lister and, always sort of secretly fascinated and maybe feeling stirrings that she didn't know she had. But again, those nuances on her face as she goes through these moments, I just,
Well,
ugh.
and it
love
was
her.
so socially taboo. I mean, Miss Walker is literally terrified. I mean, she
That
is
they could be-
terrified of what
yeah.
she is feeling.
Because there were two men, that was an actual event that they talk about, that were put to death for sodomy. I think like maybe the year before they met.
Yeah.
So that was a real fear that she had. There were no women that were ever put to death for that crime, but it wasn't a crime. But it was for men. So you can see that being.
But, yeah, I mean, like I said, just to live every day with terror of expressing yourself, I mean, and genuine mortal terror, not just social terror, but,
Yeah.
you could, maybe you wouldn't get put to death for it, but you'd be socially ostracized and, committed or, any number of things, they said lock you in the attic for that.
Yeah, which is really weird for the actual diaries, because in the diaries, she doesn't care about the social aspect of it, and it's kind of just like, oh yeah, that's gonna happen, like that's her attitude towards it. At least that's the way that that Anne describes Miss Walker's attitude. And what was more scary for her is her obsession with mortality because of it. And that's the piece, because Anne was staunchly religious. She went to church every single Sunday. She commented on every single, the service, thank you, and would comment on it and say, well, I don't agree with that, and this is what I think instead. And how just interesting her thoughts were about, marriage and the way that it functions and why it's important to commit yourself, as well as just the way that the universe worked, in her opinion. And Anne was also very religious. I mean, and one of her wedding present to her was a Bible, like a leather-bound, beautiful, expensive Bible that she'd given, that Anne gave to, that Miss Walker gave to Anne as their wedding gifts. And what's interesting is that Miss Walker was terrified. She's so scared, so much so that whole breakdown that she has, and then Anne comes and takes care of her, and her friend is there. That did happen, and but it was over a 2-week period, 2 weeks of that, not just a couple of days. That she by the end of it, she was just exhausted, and went back home, and then intentionally avoided Miss Walker for a month. Completely avoided her because she couldn't cope. She couldn't cope. She just couldn't. And that was this beginning spiral down of the break apart of their actual relationship, and then her leaving.
Well, you see so much they suffer from lack of mental illness knowledge, the skills that we have that are even now very primitive, since psychology is such a new medium. We've only, really been practicing it since the 50s. So, I felt so bad for Anne Walker, because she doesn't have any tools at her disposal to get herself to deal with the traumas that she's been through in her life. And you can see when you attach yourself to someone that you love, feeling like they're going to be your anchor, and then that person goes away. I mean, that must have been devastating for her.
It's almost like she's suffering from manic depression, or maybe she's bipolar. I don't know. But the doctor's diagnoses for her are just wackadoo.
I'm sure hysteria.
They're wackadoo.
Hysteria covered a lot of sins.
Yeah.
back in the
You're a
days.
woman?
Right?
Oh, then you're
You just need a
hysterical.
leachate, you'll be fine. Like,
Oh, your uterus is probably moving somewhere in your body. Because, have you ever heard of the floating uterus theory? Yeah, it's great. Gentlemen, if you're not aware, that women's uteruses actually are not solidified in our body and they can move around, especially if you ride a bicycle or go on a boat. Very dangerous.
right? And then like her aunt's, friend's brother, right? I can't remember the doctor's name is. Yes, Malcolm, is that what it is? Malcolm gives her a proper diagnosis, and that is actual. Like, he legitimately said, you need good weather, you need socialization, you need to exercise, you need to get out and make yourself more active. That's what you need to solve this.
Which for the time is an absolutely correct and stunning diagnosis. Like, most of the time they'd be like, you need to rest and you need to stay inside. You don't need to see people. You have to wait till this passes.
Get a vibrator.
Stay depressed and close the curtains and don't open them ever. Like,
Maybe have some laudanum.
yeah. But her aunt and then an uncle that live nearby that are like the busybodies that come over all the time and the Priestleys, right? The Priestleys legitimately said, no, that diagnosis is incorrect. She needs to be in bed. She needs to eat. Like, even the description of what they're feeding her, like oatmeal at every meal, and very she needs blood flavored food, and all these things that I would be depressed too.
Sounds horrible.
It is horrible, and you have to understand, like, this is going on for years, and even Anne notes that when they ate together, that she always had a very plain meal, that Miss Walker always ate she didn't salt her food, she didn't pepper her food, all because this is what all the doctors said that she should do. And then all of a sudden now she's eating cakes and she's going out and doing things and dressing more vibrantly and all these things. So it's really fascinating.
Just to talk a little bit, I have pulled this up a couple times. This is an actual plaque that was placed on the church where they took communion together, so had their form of a wedding. So I just think that's so cool that was placed.
Actually, so when I listened to a podcast, and when they did it, there was this big controversy because when they posted it, they didn't use the word lesbian, and a lot of people were rightly upset about that, and so they went back and they revised it.
Yeah, I think they said gender non-conforming in the first version.
So what does
Also,
it
I'm kind of
say?
angry that, it takes two to get married, and Ann Walker got second billing.
That is true.
That's true.
What's the small
The
print?
patriarchy. It says, Anne Lister, 1791 to 1840, of Shipton Hall, Halifax, lesbian and diarist, took sacrament here to seal her union with Anne Walker, Easter 1834. And the other picture that I showed is the actual Shipton Hall, where they actually got to film, which I think is really cool.
Still around.
Yes.
It's a cultural center now in West Yorkshire. Having just been out in the UK and May, I'm kind of sad I didn't make it down.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So all the remodeling from what it was before was actually done by Anne. She, over a 3-year period, slowly had the house updated and fixed, but when you walk in, I'm just looking at pictures, I haven't actually been there, but when you walk in, you can see the older section before Anne, and then the other section after Anne had remodeled the whole house, and the difference in it is crazy.
I love the difference between, and I think it's another one of those cool visual tricks that the filmmakers are playing with, that very sort of, because the original Shipton was built in the 12 or 1300s, so it's really ancient.
Actual Tudor construction.
Yeah, and you can tell just by the style of it. So it's very old and dark and low ceilings. It doesn't look like where a wealthy older family would live. And then you go to the Walker estate, this beautiful, airy, massive home.
Right, so Anne had, at the time, she had about 800 pound a year. Miss Walker didn't realize until after Anne got in her life that she was supposed to have 5,000 pound a year, but was only collecting 1,500 of it, knowing that 500 of it was going to family. So there's this amount of money that was floating around that the family would go into the bank for her and get, that was floating
Probably
around,
not.
which is why the whole, like, her dictating to Ms. Walker to write those letters, to different people asking for money, it was a thing. Like, she actually sat her down and really did, like, no, you say this, you tell them no. And, it was a huge deal. So much so that for like a couple of months, her family forbade Ms. Walker from even going to see Anne because of, she shouldn't be meddling in family affairs, basically.
You're cutting off our supply.
Right? I mean,
Well,
like,
and then Anne took on the supply herself, and all of the creations to Shipton Hall. I mean, Anne was a good businesswoman. You know, the Shipton estate, agriculture and tenancy, stone, timber. Her family, coal, was obviously had her family had interests in turnpike fees and tolls. They were shipping and making cloth, even pew rentals in the local church, which apparently was a thing. You had to pay for it.
Yes, that's actually, I think they talk about that in Jane Eyre. Yeah, so like if you're reading notes of, it's so fascinating. Just random, you have to rent your pew.
But all of the things that Anne really wanted to do to try to get to next level. I mean, there was a point in her life, spoilers, where she even wanted to open a casino.
That would be amazing.
We need you to get on that. So, you know, but like everybody else, I mean, I think, you know, Anne helped Miss Walker to, you know, better take control of her money, but again, it's just this poor woman's tragedy of just being used her entire life. Miss Walker totally funded the renovation of Shipton, for sure, and the coal pits and a few other things.
Also